Boom. Here we go. I was just waiting for like the record button to appear. Um, Rebecca Stern, welcome. Did I even tell you what I'm calling this podcast? So welcome to, do you remember He-Man?
Yeah.
That's your generation. So the first guest, she's like, I don't remember that. It's like, not your generation. She's on the younger end of the millennials, but we're like Gen X, right? So
Yep.
it's called L&D Man and the Masters of the Learningverse. So
I love it.
welcome everybody. I am the L&D Man, and with me today is one of the masters of the Learningverse. We have Rebecca Stern, who is the Director of Learning and Organizational Design at Udemy.
Hi, it's
Spelled
nice to hear, Josh.
UDMY. Yeah, it's good to
Yeah,
see
that's
you.
right.
I love when we always catch up, and this time I was like, let's record a catch up, and I want to talk to you and ask you all sorts of questions. So how have you been?
I've been really good. Yeah, it's been I'm getting over I like to call the preschool ick, so I'm a mom of two, and I hope you kept your coffee in there. But you
Yeah.
can't escape it, the preschool ick. So yeah, so we're getting over that in the household, but overall it's been a really good start to the new year, and today is the first day of spring, so that's super exciting as well.
Yes. No, I love a good phrase or name. Like, so the preschool ick is new to me, and but what it is not new to me, but just the
Yes,
name of it. So
you've
that is
experienced
now
it.
that is now what I'm going to call it, because I have a preschooler. So you have two kids. How old are they?
4.5 and 1.5.
Yeah, all right. Okay. So you're in it.
We're
The
in it.
thick of
Yeah.
you're in the thick of the ick.
Yeah.
Um,
Thick of the ick.
uh, so and what are their what are their names? If you feel like putting that out there, if not,
Yeah,
don't
sure.
go.
Yeah. My oldest is Camden and my youngest is Cora.
Right. Camden and Cora, and I remembered Camden because of the Baltimore Orioles thing.
Yeah, the baseball
So,
connection there.
right. So yeah. The I've been sick more times this year than I've been in whatever in however many years, combined with obviously what has been constantly going around, but obviously through being this close to, to young children,
All
right?
the time.
Uh, so I know how that is. So, excellent. And you've got a birthday coming up. I just had a birthday,
So,
and
yeah.
you've got a birthday coming up. Any plans?
I'll be flying back from San Francisco, so I'll be on a plane for most of the day on my birthday. But that's okay. I'll get some quiet time, some time to read, some time to work on some things. So that's a nice little birthday. And then I get back in Pittsburgh around 4. So we're gonna do dinner just with my family,
Yeah,
and of course cake. That's a
of
must.
course. Yeah, my time alone, right, is so is so valuable now. So whether you get it on a plane or in a car, my wife is sends me stuff on will send me like an Instagram or a TikTok video where it's like a mom just like alone in the car, and like she does it all the time. She's like, I just need to be in the car. Like when she goes somewhere or comes back from somewhere, she doesn't get out of the car right away, and she's like, this is what moms do now. And like and I know she does it, and then she sent me like videos of other moms, like just when they get alone time in the car, they just relish in it and breathe. I don't know if you do that.
Yeah, I think it's one of the harder things about being a remote worker. So my role is 100% remote. So I'm
Right.
working from my home office every day. And you do lose a commute, right? So you don't have that commute like you used to.
Yeah.
And for me, that time alone in the car was always super peaceful. I'm a like no radio, or if I listen to
Oh
anything,
wow.
like an NPR or something.
Yeah.
So I just like that peace and quiet. And so sometimes at the end of my workday, I will turn off my computer, I will shut everything down, and I'll just sit here for 5 minutes and, almost make that mental commute so that I'm ready to go downstairs and be with the family. Because I was finding that if I didn't do that, it was too much switching, right? Like I didn't have time to process the
Yeah.
workday before I went downstairs and to be with the family.
Right. So it's post pandemic, right? And
Yeah.
you are coming back from San Francisco because Udemy is based out of San Francisco. You live in Pittsburgh,
Mm.
as you mentioned. So this is the one you go there like I remember we talked about like maybe it's quarterly or something.
Yeah, about
So
quarterly. Yeah.
that's why you're coming back from San Fran. So tell me about your role at Udemy,
Yeah.
and tell me also just like the trajectory of how you got there. I know
Yeah.
you worked at Crown Castle prior to that, and I'm sure when you will remind me, but you will tell the viewers, yeah, how you got to where you're at, doing the work that
Yeah.
you do in L&D.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with my story. Like, how did I get to Udemy? My journey into learning and development has been a little bit of a winding path, I'd say. I never set out. I was never that, kid growing up that was like, I want to be in learning and development. That's not what I thought at all. I thought I wanted to be a pediatric psychologist. I wanted to
Oh
work with
wow.
kids. And so after I finished my undergraduate degree, I went to UMBC in Maryland and go Retrievers. And I started working at a hospital called the Kennedy Krieger Institute, where I was a one-to-one direct care aide for kids with developmental disabilities.
Oh
And that
wow.
was really my way of, getting my, dipping my toe in the water and getting some experience in the pediatric field that I thought I so desperately wanted to work in. And it was just so eye-opening. I learned so much from seeing families that were um, coping with having a kid that had, was struggling with really severe disabilities and just challenges in terms of their development. And I learned a lot about parenting, from those amazing parents. I mean, they're just incredible. And I learned a lot about myself, right? And working with the kids and being a one-to-one direct care aide is such a difficult job. It's such a service, servant-oriented job.
Yeah.
And when I was there, I quickly got promoted into like a team lead type role where I was then leading a team of direct care staff individuals. And that was my first intro into leadership. And I loved it. I loved this idea of leading other people. But what really, I think, got me out of bed in the morning and really started to intrigue me was how do you help people grow and develop, right? So those individuals on my team that were struggling with something in particular, or they needed to learn something to get better, they wanted to increase their capability. Those were the people that I wanted to spend my time with. I wanted to help them learn. And being in a nonprofit environment, you have to get really creative, right? You have to think outside the box because you don't have the resources or the money to, just go buy a training or go send them to a workshop or a conference or something like that. So I earned the nickname of MacGyver there, which might be a reference that
Let's keep those
you
Gen X
get.
references coming.
Maybe
I
younger
love it.
viewers won't resonate, but essentially what that MacGyver nickname really means is that, if you give me a roll of duct tape and some string, I can make something out of it, right? I can
Yeah.
use my creative brain and I can turn that into something more than just the part itself.
Yeah.
So that's what I did a lot there, right? I got creative, I built things, I took things that we had and tried to evolve them to be better, all while not really spending any budget, right? So I was there for a long time, and it was just such an impactful experience in my career. And what it illustrated to me is that I wanted to be solving organizational problems or learning problems or helping people develop. And so I went back to school. I got my graduate degree from the University of Baltimore in industrial and organizational psychology. And had a great, fantastic experience there. Met some people that just helped me grow and learn, and some professors that helped me grow and learn. And from there, I felt like I needed a change, right? I had been at the hospital for a while. There weren't really many roles that I could move into that would be utilizing my degree how I wanted to. And so a good friend of mine had suggested that I look into consulting. She said, I think that you would like the variety of it. It would give you a chance to travel, which I really love to travel. I love to see the world and experience different things. So I had found a role for a tiny boutique consultancy called Kaizen Consulting. And at the time, they were only looking for PhD level psychologists, right? They were in this business of leadership assessment and development, and they did in-depth leadership assessments with executives. They did a lot of coaching work, and they were mainly looking for folks who had, pretty extensive training. And somehow I said, what, take a risk. I put my name in the hat. I had my master's, but I had a lot of experience, right? I'd done a lot
Yeah.
of coaching, a lot of development over the past, 5 to 6 years. And I threw my hat in the ring, and I was so glad that I did, because it was, I got the job. They were looking to start up their operations in the US. So I joined a team of 5 other people in the US. I spent some time in the UK getting trained and learning the business. And then I moved to Boston, and got to work with a really fantastic small team. And I just learned so much about leadership assessment and development. And how do you design a program? And how do you really coach effectively? That's where I learned to coach. I had some fantastic mentors there that showed me the ropes and, helped me become a better coach. Kaizen sold the business to Deloitte then. We had done some work for their partners, done some leadership assessments, and they loved it. And they said, we want to start leadership development function here. So we were acquired, and that was, again, a really amazing experience where I got to go through an acquisition. So went through an acquisition and joined the Deloitte consulting team. And got to work again on a small team that was starting up a leadership development function. So there, I really got to broaden out from this highly technical type space into more, and grow my business acumen and my financial acumen, and really understand, how do you take an L&D product or service and sell it? And what does it mean to sell to a client? And what are good client relationships? What do those look like? So I did that for, a good while. Again, really loved my experience there. I got to travel the world. I got to assess leaders from, the C-suite down to frontline leader level, all over the world. And when you get to sit one-on-one with somebody and learn about their life and learn about how they think and why they do what they do, it's just an incredible experience. And I'm so thankful that I had that, because I got to learn a lot about human behavior and human tendencies, and how do you drive behavior change, right? How do you encourage somebody to build new habits to change their behavior? So from there, I went to Crown Castle, which is where I had the pleasure of meeting you, Josh, and got to help build the leadership development function there, and then ultimately got to help build the learning and development function there. And that was a really fantastic internal experience. I had never led internal teams before, internal L&D teams. So I got to do that. And then from there, I moved on to Udemy, and Udemy represents the change in my career to work for a learning company. So again, I've never worked for a learning company before, and I really wanted to work for a company that core value was learning, and what they, Udemy's mission is improving lives through learning. So, in everything that I do, I get to focus on that mission, which is super important to me, because learning has truly changed my life, through my school experiences, through my mentorships, through my work experiences. I've learned so much, and it's been able to get me to where I am today. And so to see that power of learning happen in other people's lives, and to do that at a learning company, it's such an honor.
I love it. Yeah, so one, you said, like, my trajectory is not like, and I'm going to bet that whoever I interview throughout however many people I meet, I don't think that trajectory is going to be like a straight line, right?
Mm-mm.
Like, and I guess really that's anybody, right? Obama said progress is not a straight line, or someone, but like, this sort of work, yeah, it's not very clear cut. And like you said, like I wasn't a kid who wanted to get into L&D, like who was? And maybe these days, because this is more popular, that there are some kids out there. I hope there's some kids out there listening who are like, I want to get into L&D, or maybe they didn't. And like this is just more, in the world today, it's not becoming, firefighter princess, space explorer, right? It's like there's more like options for kids to go in their careers. So your trajectory, I mean, it's fantastically impressive. I remember that you were at Deloitte, but I don't think I knew, or at least I didn't remember that it was because that it was an acquisition, that you were like took a swing at getting into consulting, and
Yeah.
that it went. You were a UMBC undergrad also, and then you
I
got your
was,
OD.
yep, I was
And then you
UMBC
got
undergrad, and then I was University of Baltimore graduate school
oh, and
for
you
industrial and organizational psych. Yeah.
for for your is that an OD degree, or
It's
that's
very similar. Yeah, it's
okay?
definitely, and now at Udemy, I work in an OD capacity. So really,
Right.
I've worked across, I would say, the spectrum that you would expect or that you learn about in IO degrees, where you focus on more assessment and individual work and individual difference, to, how do you assess an organization in terms of like their learning or engagement, culture, things like that. And now I'm much more on the OD side, right? Where I'm designing what are those organizational processes or practices or procedures that we go through as an organization, to help us be really efficient, right? To help us achieve our strategy, achieve what we're trying to do. So those are things like looking at our performance management system and redesigning that, or looking at how do we build career paths across the organization, and how do we help people understand what career paths are available, and then connect what they're learning and doing every day to how that's going to help them in their personal career. So those are some of the sorts of projects that I get to work on now, and initiatives I get to design and redesign and collaborate on with my teams.
Nice. Yeah, so part of what you and I have talked about this before, and for those who've listened to our previous episode, is that I do coaching, either one-on-one or group training, right? Group development. So L&D, learning and development. So I love learning and supporting others in their learning, but there's a whole other aspect to this, that is this idea of design. So I've done some work in design, but not very much. Like a lot of what the majority of what I provide for people, someone else designed, someone with a PhD, or has created that. Some of it I have, but for the most part, no. So like, tell the folks, like, so you were just saying like, and I designed this, like, tell me like maybe a little bit more details of like of that work. And also, gosh, you have such a breadth of experience, right? That's why you're the head, because you can do this, you could do that. Like, tell me what you enjoy the most, like what you're most passionate about. Like, do you like to create the design? Do you like to be more facing, or what, or tell me about that, because there's
Yeah.
so much that you do.
Yeah. I love strategy and design. That's really, I feel like I found my home there. I found what I think really gets me engaged in the work and excited about the work, and what I do well, where my skill sets fit well. And I would say like the core to, when you hear me say like we design something, the core of that is identifying what are you trying to solve for, right? Is there an opportunity? Is there a problem? Like, what's the root at what you're trying to shift or change? And so I spend a lot of time up front getting to that root problem and doing that root problem analysis, and really understanding like, what is it that we're solving for? Because once you have a clear picture of that, design becomes really fun and a little bit easier, right? Because you're not just trying to solve for a symptom, right? You're truly treating whatever it is at its core, and from an analogy standpoint, like I'd liken that to almost like a doctor's process, right? If you go in with a fever and you might get recommended you take Tylenol, right? Thinking about the kids and the world of kids, you treat fevers with Tylenol, with Motrin, takes it away for 6 to 8 hours, but then it may come back, right? If it comes back, you might want to ask some more questions, right? Like what's going on? What are the underlying causes?
Yeah.
What are the other symptoms that are going on? That's not that different from what you do in an organization, right? You have to look at, well, what is the symptom that's popping up? Our managers aren't doing their performance ratings on time. Okay, well, what's driving that? Like, why aren't they doing it? What is it about the performance ratings, why they're not getting it in on time? Is it truly just a compliance issue, or is there something about the way that they're working, right? Their patterns of behaviors, the way the system is built that is preventing them from getting it done on time, right? So the more you you observe, you research, you ask a lot of questions about the people that are in there doing it, you learn a lot, right? And it helps you design better processes. So in my particular, I would say like design methodology, I really adopt more of what you would see in like product teams where you're going out, you're doing user-based research, you're asking users what they want, what their requirements are, how they want to work with the product, and then mashing that up with the experience of the team and the knowledge of the team from the learning perspective to design a better product and trying to get it out as quick as possible. So really embracing this prototyping mentality where we might get out a wireframe of something to one particular group fairly quickly. It may not be that pretty. It may not be, all the kinks aren't worked out yet, but the user gets to use it. They hold it, they test it, they work with it, they give us feedback on it. And that feedback then helps that next prototype be even better. So a lot of what I do is experimentation, right? Trying things out. And it's taken me honestly a long time in my career to, I think, find the confidence around testing it out and experimenting and not being afraid of somebody saying this isn't perfect, or not being afraid of someone saying this isn't right, or it doesn't meet my needs, and actually starting to view that feedback as opportunities to learn, right? So if somebody says this isn't right, great, tell me more about why it's not right. What do you think is right? How would you like it to be better? And then taking that feedback as fuel and using it to fuel the next iteration of the design. But that's been a learning journey for me, honestly. That's been a big personal development area for me, because I think when you think about coming out of K through 12 into undergrad, into graduate school, what are you trying to do? You're trying to get the A, right? You're trying to get
Yeah.
the perfect grades. You're trying to do it right. And right is almost the enemy of prototyping mentality,
Sure.
right? It's almost the exact opposite.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my gosh. Even like for me, like that permeates so much of what so many of us are up to in and even just like being creative, right? Like I was like, I want to create this podcast, right? I'm talking to so many people in this space in the work that I do. Why don't I like record it? Like, why don't, like I have this creative need
Yeah.
and I want to share with people. And so I'm like, okay, well, how do you do a podcast, right? So again, I am on that Zennial border, that Gen X millennial border.
Yeah.
And I'm totally generalizing, pigeonholing myself. But like, I am not on that end of millennial where I am super tech savvy. I'm more Gen X where I'm like, how do you do this? And I could have totally sabotaged myself on putting this out there because I want to do this right. Like you
Yeah.
said, I want to get the A. Whereas like, let me throw some C, the first one will be a C and maybe the next one will be a B or even worse than that. But it keep
Mhm.
getting that A or getting it right. Um, it paralyzes us. It keeps us from taking swings. and
It
just
does.
like and learning and growing, right? So
Yeah.
I can totally relate to that. I think that happens to a lot of people. That was one thing that really resonated for me in what you said. The other thing that you said is this idea of um, you see it a lot in medicine, right? It's treating symptoms
Mhm.
versus the actual disease or the actual problem, the root cause. And so many of us, so as individuals and teams and departments and entire corporations, we operate in this sort of pattern of problem fix, problem fix. People come to me and they bring the problem. And I'm like, it's a bigger conversation to be had here. It's a
Mhm.
bigger conversation. It's like, I use a lot of analogies in coaching where it's like, it's plugging holes in a boat. There's holes in the boat that we're running. It's like, okay, well, let's just plug this hole. Well, then there's another one and let's plug this hole. How do we, and this is a very coachy word or very psychology word, how do we have a complete breakthrough? How do we get a new hull on the boat so that
Mhm.
we're not operating problem fix, symptom cure, or whatever? It's not really a cure. Curing would be the full breakthrough, the complete transformation of how we need to operate so that we're
Mhm.
not just plugging holes. And whatever that looks like, right? That's what you're designing. That's what you're, putting this time and effort into, and allowing for it to be imperfect, right? We're such perfectionists that it's like, let's the first iteration, or I loved how you said prototype. Let's prototype it.
Mhm.
Here's a beta version. Okay, and then what's the next? And I'm not sure for you, is it like I love how you said that, how you've gotten to where this at and that you love this so much. And I thought at first it was like a creative thing. And maybe you do have like a creativity need, but
Mhm.
correct me if I'm wrong, like you really have that problem solving need, right? You said they called me MacGyver. So
Yeah.
like that opportunity to problem solve, that's like that feels, and correct me if I'm wrong, let's tell me how it is. I'm just experiencing
Yeah.
you. That like problem solving thing is just so huge, right? Roll of duct tape, dental floss, and I'm gonna, blow this secret lab up or whatever, whatever they
Yeah.
do
No,
in
you're
MacGyver.
spot on. You're spot on. I love problems. I love, and I know some people say like, oh, you should frame them as opportunities, and whatever you frame them as, I love them, right? Like I love when something isn't working quite like you want it to, and you have
Yeah.
to figure out how to make it work better. And I would say even in my personal life, we're on house number 4 now, and with each house, that we've bought or moved around or, lived different places, we've said, oh, we're going to look for one that's move-in ready. We're just going to look for one that we can, just move in and not do anything with. And every single house that we've lived in, we've done like renovations on major parts of our house, and I think part of that is driven by me. Because I love evolving things, right? I love to see what it is today, but then think about, well, how could it be tomorrow? And I think that is a little bit of like a problem, something isn't working quite right. And this need to be creative or think differently or do differently or try out different things. So, or just have variety, right? So the kind of the culmination of all those things for me is I think
Right.
why I feel like I've found my spot because it provides, it meets a lot of those needs.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I feel like that's what we're all, it's like exploring for, is how does this thing, how can we spend our time doing the work that meets our needs, right? Or whatever it is in our life that's just fulfilling our needs, right? Whether that's in our career or personal life, right?
Yeah.
When I'm talking to people, in the learning and development space, it's, there's something, what is that, or maybe it's like for me, why I want to talk to folks like you. It's like, um, what's the commonality, right? I want to know, like, what's the shared thing that we have, but more so than that. And this is one of the things that I talked about with our previous guest was, like in this work in the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation, right? That like we are so tribal that like we want to find that commonality, but really
Mhm.
like the next level of inclusion is like, yeah, cool. Okay, that's what we have relatable, but like what is it about you that's different? Because like that's how I'm going to learn and how I'm going to grow. Because if I just find that commonality, well, I'm no different now. But now if
Mhm.
I hear about that thing that's different about you, it's like, oh, I've actually learned something and I've grown a little in the conversation. Um, so I think you and I have a lot of similarities, but yeah, that problem solving thing, I experience that very big. And I also, I I don't know if I relate to that. Like I a little bit, but like I don't, have the need quite like you do. I have more of that creative need, right? Like
Yeah.
that really shows up big for me. So it's like, I don't know. It's I just love oh my goodness. You watch Ted Lasso. Did we talk about Ted Lasso?
No, but I did finish the season. I did watch it, and it's a fantastic show.
I think people who have any sort of psychology background, or I mean, everyone loves. I haven't heard anyone who's like, no, I'm not really into it. But people who are in the work that we do, like Cherie, our common friend Cherie, loves the show. Really resonates for her, doing similar work that we do. But anyway, he's being one of the coaches is being interviewed, and he starts, he's so nervous. He's like, they're like, how do you like getting on with the team? He's like, oh, I'm getting to know them, and they're getting to know all about me, and getting to like them. And he's doing like the King and I. He's like doesn't
Yeah.
realize he's singing the words of the King and I, but that's like what it's all about is getting to know people. My like that's a huge the King and I is like always reminds me of my mother. My mom like sings all
Mm.
the songs from that. So like when they started doing that in the show, I was like, I need to send this clip to my mom.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, so tell me about so you are you are deep in the game. You have such a wealth of experience. I'm so humbled and impressed by you. Tell me like what do you see as part, I'm so biased, right? When you talk about designing something, I'm very like, well, design something that we're like in front of people because I like being in front of people, right?
Mhm.
But there's opportunities for different types of learning and different types of training that could be digital, right? That could just be
Yeah.
a video or something like that. And that, um, I feel very like, well, it's like it removes the human element or whatever, but the truth is we need to be intentional and we need to be scalable with what we're delivering. So there's definitely opportunity for non in-person trainings. um, what do you see as like the landscape is the what I'm looking for, like, and specifically at Udemy, and maybe just like what you're seeing as trends.
Mm.
You worked at, Udemy's kind of, I don't know if they're boutiquey, right? But you worked at Crown Castle, which is a massive Fortune 500 company, right? So like, what do you see as like the trend for L&D? What are companies doing? Like, where do you see it going? Like, what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that gigantic question I just threw at you?
Yeah.
Take what you
Yeah.
want.
So
Take what
it's been
you want from it.
yeah, so being in the ed tech space now at Udemy, it's been super interesting because we're on, I think, the precipice of a really interesting time in learning. And what like I specifically see happening is there's almost this great divide that's happening between ed tech companies or platform providers that are very publisher model based. So that means that they source an expert, they bring in the expert, they have them script out their content, they film them delivering that content. And then it's this really nice, polished piece of learning, a learning digital asset that then goes on the platform that people can consume. And then there's this creator economy, right, that you see on platforms like Udemy, also much more informally on like Instagram or TikTok or other social media outlets, where you have anyone in the world can share their expertise or what they're passionate about or share what they know and create a not so polished course or asset that they then deliver online and then they get feedback on, right? So in the publisher model, there's definitely feedback that happens, but that feedback loop isn't as well oiled, right? They're not going back in and updating the published courses. Whereas in the creator economy, when creators get that feedback, a lot of times, and the really good creators are going back in and they're taking that feedback and they're immediately updating courses or content or assets to make it better and better and better and better. And so I'm super intrigued by this kind of landscape right now to see what happens with it. And what I've seen in organizations is that there's a little bit of a bias sometimes towards the polish, right? Because it looks really good, it looks really professional. If you've seen like a masterclass course, like they're so professionally done, it's like you're watching a movie, you know, like they're beautiful. It's
Sure,
really, really
sure.
nice stuff. And sometimes the creator space, right, can feel less face valid, right? Because it's
Yeah,
not happening in with a film crew in a studio and in, you know, like a really pretty location. But I
yeah,
think what that's going to push us to do as L&D professionals, also as learners, is to look beyond that face valid, like that face validity, right? Like how does it look or how does it feel? Push beyond that and say, what is it? What is the content, right? What are they actually teaching us? What is it that I'm taking away from this course? What am I able to apply outside of that learning experience? And so I think we're going to see this shift where we're pushing even further into like, what is the actual content, not just how it looks or how it makes me feel initially, which is such an exciting thing for me. And I hope others in the L&D space, because I think it's going to yield a much more inclusive set of learning that's available, right? So I'm super into this idea of the creator economy and creator marketplace, because I think it offers people a more like a fairer shot at their content. If because people are taking it, they're consuming it, and then they're giving feedback on the content itself, which is super exciting. So yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, but I'm excited to kind of watch the space and see what happens.
well, what for nice, yeah, your response makes sense to me because that you like it, because I'm just making connections here. um it breaks down that perfectionist need, right? Where like classically everything needed to be so polished and
Mhm.
everything needed to have like that production value. Where now we live in this world where content has boomed, right? And there's, it's been democratized like that, like anybody can publish content. And so now it's really just like what's the best, what's the best content, right? We don't need, I'm trying to make a podcast here, right? So it's like, am I a professional? Am I Mark Maron? I am certainly not. But like, I want to put out something and I want it to have value and meaning and I want it to resonate for someone. And I'm sure it will. I don't know who, but yeah, like so for learning content that it doesn't have to be like that. Like, it just has to resonate and what will resonate, right? And that's what we're trying, it's like, how do I get something to resonate with somebody? How do I get someone to learn and grow? And
Mhm.
and that was one of the things also that came up for me is like when you're designing for a company, right? So the world I live in, it's very much culture content, right? It's how do you uh, um, adjust to change? How do you give feedback? How do you receive feedback? How do you navigate conflict? Things
Mhm.
that you could do at any company. But also design is stuff is content that's specific to that company or what they're created, right? It's product, it's service, and it's for training the employees like how to
Mhm.
whatever it is that they're doing at that company that's very specific to that company versus just general, that's or to their specific strategy versus like general content, right? That's like the world that I live in. But like you've designed, I don't I'm just gonna make a sweeping judgment. Everything you've like designed, it sounds like everything for everybody, right? In all the different capacities you've been in, right? Like a major Fortune 500 company prior to this, and then prior to that, the preeminent consulting firm in the world. So Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. I very much, as I said before, I maybe as a kid, that story. Who is it? Was it the tall tale? Was it John Brown? Right, when they built the railroads, and then they made machines that could build the railroads, and then we didn't need people to. Oh, John
Mhm.
Henry, and he like died beating the machine. And like I love that tall tale in elementary school when we read that, and just like the need for humans, right, and not to, like. And I was using like chat. So my friend was showing me Chat GPT the other day. I was like, this
Oh
is
yeah.
amazing, but it's also like frightening, right? We don't want to eliminate the human element of things. But yeah, content is king, and it's yeah. I can't make a prediction of how things go, but it's nice. I like to see that the world is loosening up on things being so buttoned up. Like I think it was starting to happen before the pandemic, but even just the pandemic, you were saying my daughter could run in at any minute. I would love that, right? Like who cares if our children or our puppies run into the conversation? Like for things to just be so clean and perfect and buttoned up, it's like that's
Yeah.
that's a bygone era. Like let's
Right.
give
And
value to people, and if it's not clean, at least on the first go around, if ever, that's okay.
what I think too, like what we're starting to realize is how much time we waste when we're looking for a perfect learning solution, right? So if you try and make this perfect thing, right, this super polished thing, the boat could have already launched, right? Like it could be gone in terms of like what people need. And that's the shift I think L&D is still figuring out too, is how do we become even more proactive, right? How do we anticipate what the organization needs in the future? And so at Udemy, we're starting to think about priority skills for the organization, right? What are those two or three things that everyone in the organization needs to know because it's so critical to where we're going in the future? And how do you quickly rally people around those priority skills and get them developing and learning on those and then sharing their learning with each other? A personal belief of mine is that you can learn anything from any situation you're in as long as you're intentional about it. And I
Mm,
think instilling that
I love that.
intentionality into an organization it's a hard task. I think historically learning has been seen as passive in organizations. I like to say, tell me what I need to learn and I'll learn it. That's been the mentality. And I think the
Right.
big shift that we're trying to get to is this idea of learners understanding and having a perspective on what they should be learning and going out there and doing it and then sharing that knowledge with others. And to get to that ideal state, it's hard. I don't think anyone's really figured it out yet. But I believe the more you tinker and experiment with it, and listen to the feedback that's coming in, I think we'll get there more quickly than if you try and build this perfect thing that you think will solve that
Yeah.
problem, because you're just wasting time in that build when you don't really know if it works yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Um, yeah, because like, yeah, my grandma said, she got her college degree at like in like her 60s or 70s, and her master's, she was a teacher, and
Mhm.
like in her 70s, maybe 80s. And you know how kids are like, why do I need to learn this? I'm not going to need this when I'm older or something.
Yeah.
And my grandma always said, no education is wasted. No education is wasted, right? There's always something to learn. And she's right. I agree. But in the work that we do, there has to be intentionality. For someone to be engaged in the work or want to do it, it has to be applicable, right? It has to be very tightened up, to, not tightened up, but I guess a little more focused, right? And that's what you were saying about like companies. Um, they have to be on the same page, right? Like, what's our mission? Like from the top down, from the sea level. Hey, what's our vision? What's our mission? Why are we here? Why are we doing this work that we're doing? Why are you here? Why do you want to be a part of it? And then like from there, as like a grounding, okay, we are all on this mission. We all have this vision, right? We have to be enrolled. We have to be enrolled in this thing. And then from there, cool, what's that need? What's that, like, that's how we focus, at least to start of how
Yeah.
we focus it. I mean, maybe there's more questions and more distilling down to go from there, but at least initially for us to get on the same page. Like if you're at a company and you're just checking boxes and getting a paycheck, there's nothing we could deliver to you that would get you interested, right? If
Mhm.
you're not really like you said, on this ship, like if you're just trying to get a ride and you're not really like here to help the ship move, then there's nothing we can do to fuel you.
Mhm.
um so I love that. So you're a problem solver, you're creative, you obviously love people, connecting with people.
Mhm.
um you do this at work. Tell me about just your life. You've got two kids. You're a
Two
mom, like,
kids.
right? I find that people who do the work that we do, it like integrates into, like, I love the person I talked to before. She just had her second kid in the first episode. I have three children, right? It's not easy,
It's not
right?
easy. Yeah.
But I love it. That's a huge part of my identity, right? Being a coach and being a dad, these are like huge parts of my identity, right? If someone's like, you're not a good dad or you're not a good coach, I'd be like, what? Like if someone's like, you're not a good soccer player, I'd be like, yeah, I'm probably not, right? It's not a big part of my identity, but these things are right. And so yeah, tell me about, like, outside of L&D, right? Being
Yeah.
whatever else.
Yeah, I'm a mom. I'm a partner. So I have a husband, Matt. We've been together for 15 years now, which it's like kind of weird to say 15 years. Like it makes me feel old. And I still feel like I'm in high school some days. Uh so yeah, we live in Pittsburgh. Being a mom is hard, working mom. We have kind of a unique and I would say like fortunate position where my husband is a stay-at-home dad. So
Awesome.
yeah, so it's been a really interesting experience to be the working parent, the breadwinner in the relationship, and then have my husband and see him experience being the stay-at-home parent, right? And doing a lot of the unpaid care work that comes with that. And also just observing how others react to that. I still when I meet new people or I go to work events or things like that, maybe not work events, but like social events, where my husband and I are both present, it's so funny how ingrained some of these biases are. They still turn to him
Yeah.
and say, oh, well, what do you do? Like, what do you do for work? And there's some assumption there, right? There's some bias there. And they're always like
Yeah.
very floored and surprised when he says, I'm a stay-at-home parent. It's like sometimes surprising to them. And it's so interesting to hear. I don't know if you've heard this before, but like when there's a little bit of a bias when like a guy does something or a dad does something that a mom like normally would, it's like overpraised or it's like over celebrated.
Yeah.
Whereas when a
Yeah.
mom would do the same thing, it's sometimes not. And so it is kind of funny to experience that. And we've definitely had those situations where, people will be like, oh my gosh, being a stay-at-home parent, oh, like stay-at-home dad, what a great thing. Like, what a wonderful thing. Like, oh, like, it's so great that you do that, dad. And I think I haven't seen stay-at-home moms sometimes get that great of
Yeah.
praise about it,
Yeah.
so it tells me too that we still have some work to do there as a society in terms of how we view stay-at-home moms, because it is such a hard job. Like I see my husband sweat it out every day, like consistently doing over 10,000 steps on his watch, with the kids,
Yeah.
being a taxi, running them to and from places. And it's really hard work, right? It's very repetitive. It's very, kind of the same schedule every day because kids love schedules, right? They respond well
Yes.
to them. Whereas, having a job, it does provide some benefits, right? You get to do more intellectual work. You get to talk with, adults throughout your day. You get a
Yeah.
little bit of a break from the kids during the day. So it's been a really interesting thing to have, I would say, non-traditional roles. somewhat in the parenting relationship,
For
and
sure.
just see, and just live and experience that. It's been really interesting.
I love that. Part of my awesome, when you said that and I went awesome, and I knew that when we had talked previously, but I'd forgotten, um, is the fact that you are breaking social norms. Like I
Mhm.
love to hear people breaking up gender bias and social norms. Like I love that. I also like so they have like a dad 2.0 conference I haven't been to in years, but I
Oh,
went two
cool. Yeah.
years, and it's like dads that are creating blogs and create this and do that. Like, and it's a lot of stay-at-home dads. There's this other network that I sometimes hop on virtual calls with that are a lot of stay-at-home dads and like what they do, or even businesses that they've started from there, like or
Mhm.
whatever, or but I just yeah, like or just like shout out to this company. They're called Third Path, right? It's either one path or the other, where they're like, here's
Yeah.
what's a third path? Like, it's not just A, B options today. What is in 2023, what does the world look like? And how do you make it work in the world that we live in, right? And things being so, yeah, I got on the call with you before a little flustered because it was my daughter's birthday, and she got this gift that was just such a piece of junk. And then I'm the one who's got to set it up. And I'm like,
Yeah.
this doesn't even work. And I'm just like frustrated with the world that like products are such garbage. Where like when we were younger, things were made nicer and they were cheaper. So like everything's lower quality, higher price. Um, how do you make things work in the world today, and what does that look like? And people are just so, there's so many different types of people, so many different types of relationships. I'm curious how like you like, do you love like to see people struggle with that, or and also how does your husband handle that? Because like what he does is so important and so valued, and a stay-at-home parent. I love how you said like, yeah, like, oh my God, because a dad does that. Like I hate when my kids show up disheveled to school. People
Mhm.
will be like, "Oh, dad dressed you today." It's like, "No, mom did." Like
Yeah.
we both have tough times some days, and some days I hit it out the park. Sometimes my wife hits it out the park. Like, and sometimes we both crumble and fall apart because it's overwhelming, but it's
Yeah.
like those biases, like, oh, the kid isn't matching, so dad must have done it. Like, I don't want to match a kid. Like, I just didn't want to
Yeah.
deal with it. Or I wasn't even there and my wife handled it and she didn't want to deal with it. But yeah,
Mhm.
those heightenings or expectations, it's like it's
Yeah.
absurd.
It's so funny that you brought up the outfits because I was reflecting last night on when I have two sisters, and growing up, my mom like dressed us in. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, right? And she would like dress us in these matching sets and things, even though like there was a 5-year age gap between my youngest sister and me. So, like matching sets. But you know what? As a parent, like I get it now. But anyways, I was
Right.
reflecting back on how my sisters and
My
I would.
wife tries to do that. 2 year
Oh
age
yeah,
gap, but she tries to do that. Well, she just wanted to dress them very girly. And of course, whatever you want to do, the kid
yeah,
does the opposite, right? And they're
oh
like, well,
yeah,
I'm just gonna wear sport like athletic clothes. And she's like, no,
yeah.
skirts and little shoes. Like, they're like, no, sneakers and jeans. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was reflecting back on how we would like kind of like get on my mom and be like, oh, you made us dress the same, like and how that in and of itself represents like an unpaid care task that is usually attributed to moms. But it's so interesting to hear you bring up how that like still sticks, right? Like even today, you'll hear people say like, oh, like what did your mom dress you in? Or like, oh, mom must not have dressed you, dad must have dressed you. Because there is this bias that exists still of like when the kids aren't matching or something like that. And so it is funny for me to experience like it is a task to get kids dressed. Like I think we just need to acknowledge that sometimes it's a fight. Like it can be a battle. It can last hours. Like
Yeah.
and it's not the easiest thing. And at the same time, as a parent, like you do want to promote independence. And my son is 4.5, and there are many days where he wants to pick out his own outfit, and I love it. Like I look at what he picks out and I think this represents him and what he's feeling that day and what he wants to wear. And I'm like so proud of him for picking that out and going out into the world and being his own human. And sometimes that does really get to me when people say things like, oh, dad must have dressed you, or mom must have dressed you. And Like, well, no,
Yeah.
like that's his style. He dressed himself, and
Yeah.
of course within reason, he did ask to wear shorts today in Pittsburgh. It
Right.
is 37 degrees, and
Oh,
that's not going to fly. But a little redirection there can help get
yeah.
him on the right track.
Well, that's a whole control thing, right? Like I don't
Yeah.
want you have to let kids have some control and then like right so that so that they don't feel out of control and flip out. So it's like you got to give them some, if they're safe and healthy, you dress like a clown, right?
Mhm.
But if it's like, okay, it's freezing, you are not wearing a bathing suit today. So there's like
Yeah.
you got to pick and choose your battles for sure as a parent. And my son so I have two daughters, and now my son, and I had so much stuff as a kid that was girly, not necessarily um uh skirts or anything, but like a lot of pink that my parents were just like, you get the pink tricycle, we're not buying you a new one, which
Yeah.
is totally makes sense, right? It's very
Yeah.
much like a money thing, but my parents were just so unattached to like gender norms with colors. Like this functions, you can learn how to ride this, it's pink. And like I never really cared about that. And my son every day wears, and and maybe there's something in my head, right? Like they I don't relate to it as girly, but he wears this thick leopard coat. So
I
he
love
looks
it.
like, frankly, I love it. I love it. He looks like, and it's so big and it like hangs off him, and it was like
Yeah.
my daughters, whereas they very much like leopard. And I'll wear something with like leopard. I won't wear this giant fur coat. Like he looks like a pimp. Like he really like
Yeah.
the way it hangs on him. But like a lot of people are like, oh, that must have been your daughters, and I want to be like, they're right, but I'd be like, well, what if I bought this for him and just he
Yeah.
wanted it, right? Like, I mean, he wears it because it's there and he's seen his two sisters both wear it. And this is like starting to fit him now. And he just like wants to wear it and he looks adorable. It's got like little ears on it if you put the
Oh my
hood up,
gosh. Yeah.
but it's this giant leopard coat. He looks so cute, man. But
Aw.
it's, yeah, it's just really funny. And but people have assumptions and things like that. And um, I love challenging it. I love seeing people struggle with it, right? Like I love like when you say something like that, um, yeah, I hope for you guys that it's something, and it sounds like something that both you and your husband are just so proud of. Like I really hope, because some people have judgments, right? And I'm sure I hope that you just let it pass, and let it flow through, and you guys just own it because it's a beautiful thing, right? How you
Yeah.
guys um, make not only make it work, but do what you love, right? Some, my wife's very type A, and sometimes I think I'm like, what if you went, if you worked and I stayed home and but my wife doesn't say, my wife, she's not a stay-at-home mom. She like what we call lives in the gray, whereas like she has her own business, so she works her own time. And
Yeah.
it's like it's hard, right? It's really like a hard juggle. But again, it's like in the world we live in today, how do you just make it work? How do you do what you want and get fulfilled and get your needs met, like we were talking about before, like really just get your needs met. And yeah, there's certainly uh my wife will bring the three kids out somewhere where I'm not available, and that's normal. But when I bring the three kids out and they're put together and normal, they're like, oh my God, look at you bringing all
Yeah.
three kids
Dad
out.
of
I'm
the
like,
year.
yeah, right. Where's my cookie or my pin? Like, come on, come on,
Yeah.
people. Like, my wife does this all the time, um, anyway, I'm rambling, but if there's besides the work that we do, I could talk about parenting all day. But um, yeah, I am impressed by you and your husband, but certainly in the L&D space, your trajectory and all that you've accomplished. And you've only been at Udemy how long?
About six
Pretty,
months.
yeah, so not even that long, but I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited for you. I'm super excited for how that goes. And thank you again for being on. Rebecca Stern,
Yeah,
you
no, thank you
rock.
for having me. This is
Oh
fun.
my
It's my
goodness.
first podcast, so I'm happy
Oh,
to have
nice.
that experience. Yeah,
Nice, nice, nice. Yeah, I will I'll get it up on the internet and I'll send it over to you. But this was super fun.
okay,
Super,
great.
super fun way to reconnect. All right.
Yeah, thank you so much, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. My pleasure. Take care.